Well, hello everyone. We are very excited to be on this call with some fabulous musicians that we get to hear from at our January concert. We have our conductor Mei-Ann Chen on here, our concertmaster Denise Dillenbeck, and our composer for January. We're giving her world premiere of Immortal Beloved. This is Nancy Ives. Welcome, everybody. So all of us are a little bit connected through the music world, and I thought I'd just ask each of you to introduce yourselves again and just tell us briefly your connection, and then we'll jump into talking about the new piece. So, Mei-Ann.
I am so tickled to be part of this group. I'm looking at history. Literally, Karen and I overlap at NEC when I was just a kid, struggling to learn English after coming from Taiwan, and also overlapping with Denise in the same violin studio. I was rather shy, and as you can tell, my English was sort of a barrier, but I admire Denise. She was kind of the high up in our class, ready to graduate at that point. And then later on, when I got my first job in Portland, Oregon, with the Portland Youth Philharmonic, and then later the Oregon Symphony, Nancy was the principal cellist. That has always been one of my absolute favorite member of the orchestra there. And so I am so tickled to be collaborating this wonderful premiere with all my favorite people of this long history, this music journey in America. So Denise and Nancy, please take it away at how this incredible project come into being.
Well, it was Denise's idea. From a place of deep inspiration from her that I immediately resonated with. I mean, literally, she said to me, would you be interested in considering writing a violin concerto about the women who may have been Beethoven's immortal beloved? Like, as if, and I'm like, are you kidding? I got chills. It was instantly clear to me that it just had to happen. It's and I know Karen wants to be in the background, but you need that lead commissioner to really make something, to give it the concrete opportunity for it to really come to life. So Northwest Sinfonietta really deserves a lot of credit also for making this piece happen.
Yeah,
Um,
not only the lead commissioning role, but also like knowing that there's an ensemble that will truly take on delivering a performance in a meaningful way, and with a conductor who will the same commit to giving that experience and the full time needed to make sure that all the members of the orchestra have a chance to sort of digest this together. It's really special.
well, and when I found out that Man was going to be the conductor, I was beyond excited because as she's, we've now known each other for at least like 25 years, 24. When would I, and well, of course, same with Denise, right? The last time we worked together, man, it was also a violin concerto. It was Oregon Symphony, Nadia Sonnenberg playing Piazzolla Four Seasons. It was so memorable, one of my favorite concerts of my 24 years. So I just, and then to have one of my favorite violinists in the world, and definitely one of my favorite people in the world, to actually play it. But of course, it's also, so Denise and I met when we were both in the Oregon Symphony, and then and she moved on and has gone all over the country since then. But yeah, Denise, take it away with the
Well,
idea.
yes. We had been sort of bouncing off the idea of a piece, Nancy and I, and then we were sort of open to the idea of something happening. And then it really felt like just this bolt of inspiration came from the sky one day that was about the Immortal Beloved for me. And Nancy was so immediately happy about it. And it felt kind of electric to me as soon as I heard the idea. I'm a big Beethoven fan. I love his music, and his story has been a long time fascinating one to me. And but I also have spent a life as a woman in leadership in classical music, which all of us here have, and in different ensembles that represents different experiences on that path. And it's definitely been a concern to me to find my way and to mentor young women younger than me in that. And seeing the changes that have happened in the world just in our lifetimes around women's roles really led me to thinking about the women who might have been Beethoven's Immortal Beloved, and how we have this phrase Immortal Beloved, but we don't have the story of the woman who is the key factor, and who probably was an inspiration for a lot of other pieces that Beethoven wrote. So it was really a fun puzzle to get to start to look at, to also use to highlight these challenges and areas of growth over centuries now for women in our culture.
Mm. And also what you were saying about, the way that these women were inspiring him to write pieces, and also, I remember you telling me over the years about how Beethoven's music and the way his personal, his struggles, his human struggles are communicated through his music, and how that resonated with you as you were grappling with your own personal struggles. And I mean, that's why Beethoven is Beethoven. Like, everyone knows, you say one word, Beethoven, everyone knows who that is. And that's why, because he was able to communicate all of that is so completely human, that everyone can relate to. But the everyone has that, and realizing that these women were facing very different kinds of struggle because of the time. The more I learned, the more I saw that, and it's kind of like, then the more I wanted to know, and to realize how it also humanized Beethoven for me. I had not been someone who had read all the biographies and stuff like that. I knew what any professional musician knows, and maybe a little more because Denise would tell me things. But but as I die, I tend to, like, here's a piece that I, as a composer, wrote because a friend said, "Would you write this piece?" Right? Well, that's what Beethoven did too. It was he had people in mind when he would, certain pieces. He his feelings about people would enter the music, and it just reminded me that the artistic project is a universal human experience that continues through centuries. It's not going to, it's not a transitory thing. It's a universally human thing.
I just love how, like, this is what I love about both of you, Denise. I mean, you are such a beautiful player. You catch people's not just attention, heart, but you're so intellectual. Immortal Beloved. I mean, just come up with the perfect title, right? I mean, Nancy, you just like latch onto that. But Nancy, you went and run with it. I mean, it has the annotation. I've never gotten a new piece with so much scholarly supplemental information about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is gigantic. This is epic. And so I like, my bows to both of you in terms of you just take this project and run with it. And so I have a selfish question, like, how some of the famous themes, quotations, if you will, how did you choose them, or is that came from your study of the woman that's connected to Beethoven?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, because that was one of the most challenging and interesting aspects of the project early on. Denise and I would talk. We use this app called Marco Polo, so we can just leave a video for each other at, whatever time, because our crazy schedules. And I was wrestling with how much of Beethoven's music should be referenced, because it's supposed to be about these women, not about someone who, plenty of attention. Beethoven gets plenty of attention. But the more I looked into it, I realized that his music was like almost the soundtrack of their lives. He was absolutely a titan at that time, at that place. He was not an undiscovered genius. And I mean, some of them were his students. All of them at some point were socializing in each other's homes, and he would be also a guest and would play some of his music. They would play his music. There's a famous story, not of another young woman, it's just a letter that she wrote, of her struggling through one of his songs, and he came over and said, move over, and just took over playing it because she wasn't playing it very well. I mean, these were social relationships that were very central. They didn't have TV. They weren't, that's what they were doing in the evenings. Right. And when I realized that, and I realized, okay, his music is part of their lives. So I almost can't avoid some referencing his music if I want to say anything about them. So that was important, because I really was, every time I would look at it, it was like looking at a landscape and there was a giant boulder in front of me. I'm like, where are they? Where are the women? And there's this giant Beethoven boulder and I couldn't see around it. And that clarified it for me. It's like, oh, I can incorporate it. I don't have to see around it. And I also realized, as we were like, are we once again, I mean, to be really blunt, are we just elevating this white man again? And it's like, no, he also was a victim of the imperialistic class structure and the limitations that placed. So that helped me see, well, the poignancy includes him, of some of these, the connections that couldn't be made, the marriage that couldn't happen, all that. The poignancy there includes him, because here he was socializing with these women who were all members of the nobility, almost all. And they could never be with him without dire personal cost. So he was falling in love with people who are completely unavailable. And you can psychoanalyze and say, was he one of those people who just wants to? No, I don't think so. I think those were the women he knew. They were the women who were appealing to him and interesting to him. They were his, intellectual partners. They were his artistic partners. Oh, I'm going on and on. But the more I learned about all these really interesting, it wasn't just about interesting women. It was about interesting relationships.
I want to jump in and say, in terms of quotes of actual pieces of his, two of my favorites, Nancy, that you insert. One is to suddenly hear the piano playing Moonlight Sonata. I think that's such a beautiful moment. And also, of course, I had asked for Nancy to, I felt like, even though the Beethoven's Violin Concerto doesn't necessarily figure into any of his relationships with these women, there's something to me that's very archetypal about the relationship between the violin solo and the timpani in the Beethoven Violin Concerto. There's this voicing that goes back and forth in that. And so Nancy quotes that, which feels like a little gift to me.
Oh, absolutely. That was one of the first things we agreed it would have to be in there. It's because it's just a classic. And using pieces that he dedicated to, or there are letters where people say, oh, I heard Beethoven play so-and-so, I heard the Beethoven quartets. They didn't say Opus 18 because they weren't called that. They were just the Beethoven string quartets, right? And it's like, we heard Beethoven string quartets, and then, talking about how amazing they were. So there's some little snippets. So some things like the Moonlight Sonata are going to be really recognizable to people who know his music at all. And other things are really buried. And, but they're all, they're like a code, and another code is the ciphers. So it's something I've used before, is just creating a simple cipher where you assign the alphabet to the chromatic scale. So A, B, C, D, E, F, and then you spell out the words. So I spelled out their names in this cipher. Now that creates a very atonal melody, a melody that doesn't match, common practice era harmony at all. So one of the fun things musically was to meld these atonal melodies. And I feel almost like that brings our modern sensibility in. We're looking at these historical events through our modern eyes. And we're hearing their names in a modern harmonic idiom. So that's very wonky, but that's what's happening. And it was just really a practical way of embedding their names in there, right? And then there's the challenge if I want to, bring to life the atmosphere of what they were listening to and what they were living with, and that's going to be necessarily in the style of Beethoven. So melding those was one of the musical challenges that was really fun, obviously. And another big thing go ahead.
No, I love it. It's like Beethoven wearing sunglasses. I mean, they didn't have sunglasses yet, but that's, kind of the feel we're going.
Yeah, and we're not I'm not trying to take the listener back in time. We're looking at those we're looking down the tunnel of time through our own modern eyes. We aren't trying to avoid that we have modern eyes, that we're 21st century people. And we are. And then we're just looking at these things that happened all in 1801, 1804, 1805, 1812. And it's just so interesting to me.
Mei-Ann, I'm curious to ask you what things have stood out to you in your studying the score initially as you approach the piece.
It's so interesting for me because I also grew up as a violinist, but I don't know if I could say this, Nancy, this is another question because so much of it, I'm like, Denise is going to sound fantastic on this. It's just like violinistically that it was written for you. I mean, am I right to assume that, Nancy?
Oh yeah. There were times where I admit, there were times I'm looking at it, I'm going, because I know Denise is a master of the gorgeous long line, just beautiful, expressive melodies. But I also am like, come on, she got to get to show off too. So there were places where I'm like, more notes.
That's exactly what I saw. I'm like, wow, she's working Denise hard, but not necessarily just working her hard, but showcasing her abilities on the violin. And so one of the thing before the listener know was literally I wanted to make sure I was talking to Karen mostly wanted to make sure we allot enough time on this piece so that we can put it together. It's really, I just appreciate the thought, the the details, the heart that went into this piece. And I hope people really come and witness this major violin concerto being born.
Well, and also we should point out that there's the connections go beyond the piece by having Fidelio Overture open, and that was one of those ones where like, we think this is probably the companion for this because another aspect of inspiration for Denise was the opera Fidelio, and you should jump in, Denise, if you want to say it instead. But yeah.
So yes, Fidelio, I could go on for a long time about this and I'll try not to, but operas are usually historically up to that time written around a male main character, and the women in the operas they get to be a very limited amount of things. They can be flirty and silly. They can be victims and cry about that. Beethoven wrote an opera where the woman is the hero, which is unbelievable for that time, and so noble and strong and pure, this character. And he originally named the opera for her, but his publisher didn't want that name. So we don't have Leonore, we have Fidelio. And in the opera, he's, highlighting her courageousness in incredibly like amazing acts that she does to try to save her husband, basically. And at one point, there's he actually addresses in one of the, I think it's a duet, um, the implausibility of marriage happening across different class levels. And then there's also an aria that is just about true, pure love that is so heartfelt and so like I think what is at the essence of Beethoven and what he longed for, maybe his idealized version of what a marriage would be. And I feel like that's there's a direct line between that and the Immortal Beloved letter.
You guys are making me so excited for the upcoming concert. Thank you for whetting our appetites. We cannot wait to hear the new piece and the whole concert with Fidelio Overture and Beethoven's Triple Concerto, which is so rarely done. It is just spectacular. So this is going to be a very special concert, and we owe so much of that to you. Please, everyone out there who's listening, come and join us. This will be an unforgettable concert experience. January 25th in Schneebeck Hall in Tacoma and January 26th in Puyallup. Thanks so much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.